Hello, everybody. Hope you're all doing well today. Welcome to Real Mob Stories. I'm your host, James Proctor. Today, we cover a few of the latest happenings in the world of the American Mafia. Did you know that Sammy the Bull Gravano made a claim on his live show this week that an infamous mobster was an FBI informant? We'll explore the evidence and let you decide if Sammy's being truthful or if it's just another tall tale. Next, I'll give you my recap and reactions to the new History Channel documentary called American Godfathers, The Five Families. I have some insights I want to share that you might find interesting, plus a new Wiretap recording that most people haven't heard before. And finally, will you remember the life of Colombo heavyweight Vinnie Unions Ricardo, who died last Saturday, just one day after being granted compassionate release from prison? We have an interesting show for you today, and I ask that if you like the show, please hit the like button. Also, if you're not currently subscribed to Real Mob Stories with James Proctor, please consider subscribing to the channel. Without further delay, on to our feature presentation. So the first time we're going to talk about is Sammy Gravano, and on his show Monday, he made an interesting comment regarding Larry Gallo. Larry Gallo was the older brother of Joey Gallo, the infamous gang that couldn't shoot straight from the 60s and early 70s. And Larry Gallo was actually the leader of that gang. It really wasn't Joey, but when Joey went away to prison, Larry also ended up getting cancer, and he passed away in 1968. And then Joey gets out of prison. We know that we have the second Colombo War that happens, and then he's clipped in Umberto's clam house in 1972. And so we know that history. But then, it's one of the things that Sammy Gravano mentioned was that Larry Gallo was a confidential informant. And, I know that that's been around for maybe a year. I know about a year ago, I'd gotten some documentation on it. At the time, I wasn't sure if it was true or not. And the main, and we're going to actually show the evidence, show the documentation that purports that he is a confidential informant. But at the same time, the way that the document was written, it was a little bit unusual. And, I had some questions. I know that one of the things when it comes to informants is that you want to be able to protect the identity of those people because you don't want the source, getting whacked, which would have happened, if that's true. But, the only thing we know is that there's been one document out there purporting it was only one page. It was just more general information. But at the same time, if this did happen, then we have to say that he was an informant. So someone did inform. It's just what I am trying to validate that it was actually Larry Gallo. And when I show you the document, you'll see why, I have some questions. But, it's a good chance it really was. But let me go ahead and show you the document, and we will talk about it and read it. So I'm not sure if you can read this, but this is the first page. And so the source is the actual informant, and the person identity is DET as in Tom 27. And one of the things that struck out to me was that normally the initials refer to the actual location of the FBI office where that informant is working out of. And so normally you'll see an NY for New York, and for DE, I was thinking that meant Delaware, but I think that the FBI in the early 60s was using a couple of combinations of codes. And so, we know that, Joey, we know the Gallo crew had some contacts up in Boston in that area, but, Delaware, wasn't sure about. So, it might be Delaware, but, I'm thinking that the DE probably at this point does not refer to the actual field location. So we'll kind of go through this. So, and this is from May 11th, 1962. And so source advised that Lawrence Gallo informed them at the present time he had between 35 and 40 men working for him, and at that time he had no plans for making trouble for Joe Pravacci. And then the source stated that Gallo had informed him that he heard that Pravacci was very ill and only had a short time to live. Source stated that Gallo made the statement that Pravacci's death would not change the situation, that whether he lives or dies, that there'll be peace in the Brooklyn, New York area, and that the Gallo gang would get various rights and properties in Brooklyn that were due the Gallo brothers. And then the source advised that Gallo stated that the term button man is a term used to name a wise guy in the rackets who had proven himself to be loyal and who's been given positions of responsibility in the rackets. And source states that Gallo informed him that was an organizational setup in the underworld today, and that the lower echelon men in the organization would be considered button men. And then the source stated that Gallo, in fact, admitted to him that he would be called a former button man for the Pravacci regime. Going in further into the underworld, Gallo advised source that there's a group of men in the United States who are considered high ranking in the underworld who belong to an organization called the Commission. And Gallo stated that these men are respected by the underworld. They're arbitrators in settling disputes which arise. And then Gallo advised source that the organization set up similar to a military arrangement, and each commission member has his own organization, and that the persons that owe allegiance to this man's particular organization are considered to belong to this member's family. And so that was pretty much it. It was pretty general information. What we can get from this was pretty much at the end of the, you'd already had the kidnappings in 61. You had the initial war that had taken place. By this time, it was close to when the first war had ended and when Joey Gallo had went to prison. And so what we see here is he just says that the number of men that he has working for him, that he's not going to cause any trouble. Also, he gave the information that Pravacci is ill, and that Pravacci had promised certain territories or rackets would be given to the Gallos. And then he just goes over, what's a button man. He does confirm the existence of the commission. And so when you look at it, you're thinking, well, you have a source given this information, and it sounds like that the source was the one actually talking to Larry Gallo, and that it was not Larry Gallo telling the government this information. So that's what you get if you just look at page 1. But then when you look at the next page, this is the identity of the source. So the DET 27 it's stated here that it is Larry Gallo, New York City racketeer. And it is interesting that the identity of the source, that's the only one listed here. But I think that this is like a separate document or separate page. It's not typically given with the report. So this would be something that only certain people with the authority would have. And so it's stating here the identity of that person. Could this be wrong? Could it be mistaken that it's just talking about the person that gave the source the information? I'm not sure, but if you look at this document, it is authenticated that at least the first page is authenticated that there's a chance that Larry Gallo is indeed was a confidential informant, and that at least he gave information up one time to the feds. So let me know what you think about it. Do you think that Larry Gallo is indeed this source, or do you think there's another explanation? Do you think that Sammy Gravano's right about this? So let me know in the comments. And it's kind of an interesting question. It's nothing that about a up until about a year ago, this was never out there. So it's definitely something pretty recent, and so just let me know your thoughts on it. So I want to talk to you a little bit about this show that came out. So there's a new documentary called The American Godfathers, and it's based on the Five Families book that Selwyn Ryab wrote. I don't know, about 15 years ago. And I know in the last show, what I'd mentioned is that that's one of the best resource books I've ever read about the American Mafia. And in the last couple of years, we've had some pretty bad documentaries. We had the Get Gotti one, and then we had What It Takes to Be a Mob Boss. And so I wasn't very impressed with those documentaries that came out. And when I heard about this one, there wasn't really a lot of publicity about it. I know I don't watch a lot of television, but I was a little surprised when it came out, but it was interesting to me. So what I ended up doing was just buying it from Amazon Prime. It was $6.99. I don't have the History Channel or any of that, so that was my way of being able to watch it. And it was definitely interesting. It was better than these previous documentaries we've had the last couple of years. It's a little bit like Fear City, but it's I would say that it's less sensationalized. It's it's 3 episodes. It's about 4.5 hours. Each episode is an hour and a half. Overall, I would say that's good. It's probably rated a 7 out of 10. For people that aren't deep researchers into Cosa Nostra, I think they'll really like this. They'll learn a lot. For me, I didn't learn necessarily much new. It was more confirmation of things that I already knew. And then I thought the best part of it was the wiretaps that was played of Joe Massino and Vinny Basciano in the MDC. That was something that I had not heard before. And I know Joe Puzzles, another content creator, had actually put a couple of shorts out on that earlier in the week, and I linked to that from the community page. But, I thought that was still the best part of this. So there were 3 episodes. The first episode was dealing more with the origin story of the American Mafia, talking about Sicily, talking about how these guys came over to New York. They settled in areas like Little Italy and East Harlem and Williamsburg, Brooklyn, all those areas. And so they talk about the Castellamarse War and the beginnings of the commission with Lucky Luciano and the original 5 bosses. And they spend quite a bit of time, I thought, on, especially in episode 1, about, Frank Costello. And, it makes sense because, Frank Costello is very much a business guy. He, had to testify before Congress. And I thought that was, I thought they did a good job on that. And then as you go into the second one, which is more in the 60s and 70s, 1960s and 70s, they start talking about the bosses after the original one. So like I said, all of this is mostly about the 5 families bosses. You don't really get much about anyone else. You just really hear more about the bosses themselves, the Godfathers, as they say. And so the second one dealt a lot with Joe Massino, Joe Bonanno, and also Joe Colombo. Michael Imperioli was the narrator. He played Christopher Montesanti in The Sopranos, and then you had a real good mix, I thought, of journalists, former mob guys, authors, that type of thing, that were interviewed as part of this documentary. And most of these people, you had Chris Colombo on there, Dominick Cicale, Rita Gigante, Michael Francis, Richard Cantarella, and then Frank Di Matteo. And then on the journalist side, you had Anthony DeStefano, Selwyn Ryab, and he's actually alive. I had said in my previous show, I wasn't sure if he's still alive or not, but he's definitely alive. And then they talked to Edward McDonald, the prosecutor, and you've got Larry McShane. So you got some really strong people in this. And I think that was one of the problems I saw with the previous two documentaries, the Get Gotti one, and then What It Takes to Be a Mob Boss. I didn't feel like that we got good people interviewed for those shows. And so the problem I had was more with Joe Colombo, how they portrayed Joe Colombo, and also with the Gallo brothers. And one of the things that they kept on referring to with Joey Gallo and them is that they were the ones that took out Albert Anastasia. And I know that a lot of people believe that. That's been something that's been out there a long time, but more recent evidence shows that it was actually something internal, that was Carlo Gambino that was behind that hit on Albert Anastasia, and that he actually had commission approval to do that. And then with Joe Colombo, they mentioned some stuff. They had a couple of former FBI agents, and one of the things they mentioned was that Joe Colombo had taken out 12 people on his own, that he was a enforcer for the Pravacci family, and he was more of a racketeer. He was not one that was into the violence, especially not taking out 12 people. I'd never heard that before. I thought that was not backed by any evidence. And then you still had folks saying that Joey Gallo was behind recruiting the black guy that actually that shot Joe Colombo. And we don't have any proof of that. And in fact, I've got a document I want to show you where you actually have an informant that states that it was made up by the media. So I'm going to show you that in a minute. But at the same time, there was also, they were saying that maybe that Carlo Gambino had worked with Joey Gallo, and that, that's how they had Colombo, that they were upset because Colombo was revealing the identities of these mobsters because they were marching in front of the FBI building. And we do know that, there was that Carlo Gambino was not happy about the publicity that was happening, but at the same time, we don't have any evidence that Carlo Gambino put a hit out on Joe Colombo, and I don't think it would have been done that way if he had. There was a couple other things they misrepresented, where they said that Joe Colombo had a meeting with Joey Gallo, and I think Joey Gallo was asking for $100,000 to make peace. The stories I've heard was Joe Colombo had offered $1,000. It wasn't accepted, but they said that it was only $1, and that Joe Colombo threw the dollar down on the ground, and there's no evidence that Colombo did that. And then one of the things that really I thought was revisionist history was that they were trying to say that the Italian American Civil Rights League was a scam, that it was just a racket for Joe Colombo to, make money off of it. They also mentioned that he was running rackets, extorting businesses, making them give money to the league. And, there's no evidence of that. In fact, the IRS, the authorities had been looking at the books of the Civil Rights League, and there was never any sort of evidence that there was any sort of money laundering or anything illegal going on with that. And the truth is, you had 50,000 people that were paying members. The league was providing scholarships to students. It was anti-racist. They were, just talking about movements against stereotypes of Italian Americans. Also, they work with other anti-racist groups like the Anti-Defamation League. They helped impoverished people. They were helping with the inner cities. They were also pioneers of gay and lesbian rights. And, the whole thing that this league was purporting was that all races are equal. There was job programs. And one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that Joe Colombo was going to step down from the Italian American Civil Rights League. And the thing is, he had achieved what he wanted to achieve for the league, and he was ready to hand it over to someone else. And in fact, there had been plans for Dr. Thomas Sinatra to actually take over the Italian American Civil Rights League. And that was actually the son-in-law of Carlo Gambino. Phyllis Gambino married Dr. Sinatra, and the plan was that they were going to actually, head up this organization, and there would be a board of directors, all of that, that would be to oversee it. And Joe Colombo was going to step down. So I just felt that some of the information on Joe Colombo was not factual, and I just wanted to mention that. So here's just something I wanted to show you, that what I have here is another document of an informant, and this is from a couple of weeks after. This was August of 1972, and this was after Joey Gallo had gotten clipped, and this is from a source. This is an informant, and I think it's interesting because a lot of people say that it was Joey Gallo behind the hit, but here's what this guy says. The source said in his opinion, even though it's evidence many in the Colombo family are carrying guns, it does not mean a war is about to break out. The source believes there are certain people who are associated with made guys in the Colombo family who believe the newspaper nonsense that Joe Gallo was behind the shooting of Joe Colombo and may have had others slated to be hit. Others, including perhaps members of the Colombo crime family, while knowing full well that it's not connected with Gallo or any other organized crime guy, still resent the opposition of the Gallo crew to both Joe Colombo and the Italian American Civil Rights League. This resentment might well, in the source's opinion, lead to a lot of talk about open contracts on Joe Gallo and his associates. So I think this is interesting because this informant is actually stating that Joe Gallo's not behind it, that it was a media creation, and this is referring to Joe Colombo getting hit. And the people that were close to Colombo know that it wasn't Joey Gallo. They know it wasn't anything to do with organized crime. In fact, many people now believe, and in fact, Chris Colombo as well, that this was actually done by an counterintelligence arm of the FBI. So I just wanted to bring this up because I thought it was really interesting to get this information regarding, Colombo getting shot and what people at the time thought about Joey Gallo. Okay. And so, like I said, the best part of this documentary, in my opinion, was we were able to see some wiretaps and hear some wiretaps that we hadn't heard before, or I hadn't heard before until the last week. And this involves when Joe Massino was in MDC. He was acting as an informant. He had been found guilty of murder and racketeering, was facing a death sentence. And after he was found guilty, he went to the judge and he offered to become an informant. And actually, he wore a wire. And so this is a conversation with Vinny Basciano, and thought it was very interesting. Wanted you to hear it.
This is Special Agents Jeff Salette and Jimmy DiStefano, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. 12:21 p.m. We have put a consensual recording device on Joseph Massino with the intention of intercepting Vinny Basciano. It is January 7, 2005.
What are we going to do to go out? Yesterday, I had too much to do. I had a visit, I had to wash my clothes, 2 lawyer visits.
How's yours?
I seen all last night. What'd you think of that brief?
Great. I don't think it's good. I think it's great. They're doing the same thing to me.
I might be indicted again. Conspiracy to murder.
Who? This prosecutor, I can't underestimate him because he's a dirty, rotten cop. Okay? What is wrong?
No, I know that. But you gotta remember one thing, dude. Listen to me. I know you told me in the booth time. I said, let me think about it. But I don't know who you told.
Nobody.
But I don't know that until just now.
Oh, Joe, you're my guy.
I understand.
I'm not that
How? Do I know maybe you said something to Dominick?
No.
Do I got to ask you?
Yes.
Okay.
No.
I got to ask you.
I got you. Dope.
Remember, we spoke in full time.
Yeah.
We want to take the prosecutor out. What have we been doing? That's not me. That's off limits. Yeah, we talked about the prosecutor.
Right.
And I said, give me time to think about it. I thought you were time up here. Think. We ain't gonna benefit.
No.
Let me ask you a question. I want you to be honest.
I always have
But you can't play with me. The other day you played with me and I let it go. I'm concerned with this Randy.
nothing. Forget it.
I don't know. Who knows about it?
You want to know something?
Yeah.
All practical purposes, nobody can think that it came from you. Nobody. That's it. Randy was just a up, and I gave him 100 chances. What happened is...
But you still can't do it without getting an okay from me. You're not the boss. You gotta have unity. Without unity, you got disunity, you can't win.
But you know the thing that you fail to realize, Joe? The guys right now, there's an open door for rats. Because of what happened over here, you can trust a handful of guys. Dominick is a loyal door.
I don't know. They'll never know. You tell me I gotta believe it.
It's done.
Okay, so it's kind of interesting because I know we've heard Dominick Cicale talk about how he's been on tapes, and he said many times that if Vinny had kept his mouth shut, this wouldn't have happened. And so you actually do hear, Vinny, bringing up the murders, bringing up, Dominick. So, definitely wasn't a smart move. But at the same time as well, you have a boss that's asking you a direct question. So what do you do? So, I know it's not a easy decision, but, it obviously caused a lot of problems for Vinny and Dominick, and, Joe Massino ends up, getting out. I believe in 2012, he spent maybe 5 years in and spent the rest of his life out of prison. So I just thought that was actually the best part of this show. I think it's worth watching. I think for most people, you'll learn a few things. I mean, one of the other things they made a mistake on was they stated that Sammy Gravano was a member of John Gotti's Bergen crew, and that definitely wasn't the case. But that was just a a minor mistake. And then also, it's interesting also in the second episode, they kept on saying that Joe Messino had the nickname of Joey Bagels. And I don't ever remember him being called Joey Bagels, but maybe he was. I mean, maybe some of you guys know if he went by Joey Bagels. But, that was one thing I'd never heard before, was the nickname of Joey Bagels. So anyway, it's definitely worth watching. The last thing I wanted to do is I'm just going to play a short. We had the death of Vinnie Unions Ricardo. He was a big guy with the Colombo family. He had been in prison for about 3 years. He had a 51-month sentence, and he had requested a compassionate release. And, he's had a lot of health issues, especially heart issues. And on Friday, he got it. He got the compassionate release. He was there in Buckner, which is the federal medical hospital. But before he could be released from prison on the compassionate release that he was approved for, he passed away the next day. He passed away last Saturday. He was 78 years old. To me, it was just really ironic. Such poor timing, I guess. He gets his release, but he doesn't get to, enjoy any time on the outside. So here we go. This is a short that I did on Vinnie Unions Ricardo.
It was reported in Gangland News today that Vincent Ricardo, a.k.a. Vinnie Unions, an alleged capital regime of the Colombo family, died in Buckner Federal Prison Hospital on August 17, 2024. He was 78 years old. In a case of twisted fate, Vinnie was granted compassionate release the day before he died. Vinnie had served 35 of the 51-month sentence for racketeering back in 2021. Vinnie Unions had an interesting history, as he is a Colombo associate in the 70s and 80s. He had his first heart attack in 1984 and gets made in the fall of 1991. In November 92, Vito Guzzo, who led the Giannini crew in Queens, tried to take out Vinnie Unions. Guzzo suspected that Ricardo had taken out his father in upstate New York in 1987. A U-Haul truck pulled in front of Anthony Messi's car in Mespeth, while a second car boxed him in from behind. Guzzo and another guy wore Halloween masks and raked the car with gunfire, taking out Messi and badly wounding Vinnie Unions and Paul Schiava. Vinnie was a huge money-maker union guy for over 20 years with the Colombos.
Okay, so that's all I wanted to show you, but yeah, he is definitely a big deal. I talked to just through text with Bill Cotolo, and he was telling me that that his father was friends with Vinnie Unions, and Bill himself knew Vinnie Unions and was close to him. So, like I said, Vinnie Unions was 78 years old, and he had gotten his compassionate release, but in this twisted fate, he still died in prison. So, just wanted to share that with you. All right, that's all I have for you today. Again, I'd love to hear your comments on our show today. Let me know what you think, and thank you again for all of your support. Also, please hit the like button, and if you haven't subscribed, again, please consider subscribing to Real Mob Stories with James Proctor. With that said, take care, stay safe, and God bless you always.